Blog Talk Radio.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
In Dallas, Texas, 3 shots were fired at President Kennedy's motorcade in downtown Dallas. The first reports say that President Kennedy has been seriously wounded by this shooting.
It is a big idea, a new world order.
It was almost as if it were a planned implosion. It just pancaked.
Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
But I also believe that a lot of gun owners would agree that AK-47s belong in the hands of soldiers, not in the hands of criminals.
You have done an amazing job. The visual impact that people will experience when they see what you have produced. You've been very impartial in your presentation, and you have allowed the people, the viewers, to make up their own mind. You present the evidence, and anyway, it's an honor to have you on the program.
I want to say that the work that Dennis Wise has undertaken and accomplished, and the value of this work cannot be underestimated at this time, especially. He has undertaken to present actual information about the most controversial period in human history. We have to give a narrative that has painted a picture, an image for the world to consume. And we have to look at this. The reason this is so important this time for everyone to look at is we have to challenge the lies. Okay, that's one thing right there, just from a moral standpoint. In our time today, it is more than just a morality. It is a matter of physical survival itself, because we have to look at this period and look at exactly what happened, which Dennis Wise has presented to us in his great accomplishment that he has put together now. We have to look at what happened. We had power in 1845. It was Stalin, Churchill, and Roosevelt. And what did they do with this power? As again illustrated in his great work, The Greatest Story Never Told. Yes, if you want to see the dangers that are facing the world today, just watch this film. One can see the actual facts, indisputable facts of what really happened at that time.
All right, everybody. Joseph Gibson podcasting here, restoring our republic. I got a full call board here, so I did invite a guest to come on with me here tonight to have a discussion. A friend of mine actually recommended her. I've been trying to get her on the podcast for quite some time now. Her name is Cindy Prizio, so I'm going to check the board here now. And if she's on I got like 13 different phone numbers that I got called in right now. So if you could just press 1, Cindy, if you are there on the board right now, I'd appreciate it, and then I'll connect you. Just press 1 on your phone if you are available. All right. Let's see. Okay, there she is. Okay, good. All right, so I have about 15 numbers. Everyone else, you just have to wait until we're done, and maybe you have some questions for her, or maybe you're friends of hers, I don't know, or people that I told about the show here tonight. So let me connect Cindy. You'll hear. Cindy, you there?
Hi, how are you? Yep.
I'm doing all right. If you can you just introduce yourself to? I'd like you to just introduce yourself to my audience and just tell me about who you are, what you do, what you're involved with in the state of Connecticut.
Yes, happy to. But before I do that, I did invite my colleague on, David.
Okay.
And so is he allowed to press 1 as well?
Yep. He can press 1, 2. Yep. And I'll patch him through with both of you, so you both can feed off of each other and me. How's that?
Perfect.
All right.
Perfect.
Yep. There he goes. I see him. I see his number. Okay. 860. Go ahead. I'm going to unmute his phone. There you go. So, okay. He's live too. David, go ahead.
All right.
Okay,
well, my name.
Okay, go ahead, David.
Go ahead.
I know this is what goes.
Well, just as a quick intro, my name is David Wash. I actually do the legislative coordination work with OSJ, so I work with Cindy quite a bit.
Okay, great. Cindy, it's your turn, and go ahead, talk away. You got a big audience here tonight. I got a lot of people. We're more of like a national, worldwide audience. I've got about 26,000 people that download the show and listen to it live. And then whoever downloads and listens to it in the archive, I'll send you a link to the show, and you can forward it to your friends if you'd like. But and then maybe people want to call in and ask you some questions, maybe, perhaps. I don't know. I got a lot of people from Connecticut. I see a lot of Connecticut numbers tonight, so a lot of 203 numbers. So, but Cindy, go ahead. I'm going to give you the floor.
Okay. Well, my name is Cindy Prizio. We founded a nonprofit, a 501c3, in 2015 or 16, and we called it One Standard of Justice. And our community are those that have been arrested or convicted of a sexual offense, and their families. And so, unfortunately, because of the amount of harm being done throughout the
preconceived notion of what that is. Yeah, a lot of people already, they're going to get to say, oh, wow, sex crime, automatically you're an animal, you need to be put in jail for the rest of your life, and they not even knowing the facts of the case or what has happened, because a lot of people are wrongly convicted also.
Yes, they're wrongly convicted, or they're convicted of behaviors that aren't quite what our heads imagine. And that's one of the problems, right? We've gotten certainly really post, beginning in the 90s, right? We started with the super predator and the post-carceral, punishment has just steadily increased. So we've got guys from the 90s who might have gotten, or 80s even, who got, maybe 6 months in prison or no months in prison and 3 to 5 years probation. And today you would get, there's mandatory minimums, and then on top of that, you are given 10 years up to 35 years on probation, and then you're given 10 years or lifetime on the registry. And so while everyone thinks, like, when I first got into the state, that we were cheerleaders, rah, 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 for sexual harm and sexual crime, I mean, quite frankly, we're advocates for all people. Society is doing a huge amount of damage, stigmatizing people on both sides of the coin, whether you're a victim or what we'd like to say, we don't like labels, a person who was harmed, or if you were a person who did the harm. One of society's stigmas is to the person who was harmed. She or he can never get over this. You'd be better off dead. And that's totally untrue. And then people who did the harm, they're the other, or the monster, or they're, and we forget these are our mothers and fathers, brothers, sisters, uncles, nephews, our friends. We tend to, shy away from them. We've met so many people, and one of the first questions I ask when I get on the phone with somebody is, who is in your life? And I want to hear that person has a partner, or that person is family, or that person is good friends, because this is a hard road to hoe with no support. And, that's the carceral thing, right? Like, everyone should have pro-social support and good jobs, or not good jobs, they'll say stable employment and safe housing. But we don't have any of that. And so it's amazing our recidivism rate isn't frightening and high. as opposed to, 3% and 5%. So that's all I've got to say.
And that's amazing. When I heard that, when I talked to somebody about that, they said the recidivism rate for sexual offenders in the system, or people that are convicted of sexual type crimes, that the percentage rate is between 3 to 5%. That's amazing. I mean, it's lower than any other crime. How is that? Why is that?
Joe, do you go by Joe or Joseph, hon?
Joe is fine.
Oh, so Joe, this is the amazing statistic. When a guy is caught, or a woman, because we have women on the registry as well, and you're right, they're rightfully and wrongfully, but it's one and done. 96% of all people on the registry will never commit another offense. And then you've got a couple of sort of dense ones, I don't know what to, but not like, not real problem childs, but, people who are a little dense and maybe they have a second offense or a third offense.
Yep.
And then you have a fraction of people that are really the people doing the bad behavior, the people that are the chronic relapsers, or possibly some people that we might think of as not able to change. For the most part, 70, 80, 90% of these people are low risk, the same risk as I am and you are, and the harm that's being done to them over something that might happen.
Here in North Carolina, they have something called indecent liberties with a minor, or something like that. And one guy, he was 18 years old, and now he's labeled a sex offender. Okay, he has to register here with the sheriff's department. And anytime he moves, he has to register. He can't get a job anywhere. He's 18 years old now. The victim is a 16-year-old girl. Now, how many cases do you have like that, for instance, and why does that happen? Why can't we stop that? That's absolutely ridiculous. When I was 18 years old, I dated a 15-year-old girl. I would have been a sex offender if her parents would have had me arrested. I mean, come on.
Oh, my gosh. I moved recently, and my landlady was 14 years old chasing her husband, who was 24 years old at the time. And he tried to discourage her because he is the one that's going to prison if he gets caught. But she chased him. Yeah. She was relentless. They got married, had 4 kids, lived together for 47 years until he passed on from an illness. And some people would, that's nuts. Who is to say that woman was a victim? She was happily married. Yeah. And so here's the thing, and I'll pass it over to David possibly to expand on this. We dealt with a bill this year, Senate Bill 1194, which I'll have David talk about. But this is the group of people, we call them, they were retroactively applied. So there was no public registry. But when the public registry came to Connecticut in 1998, the state clawed back 10 years. So people who had served their sentence and were living their best lives, rebuilding their lives in the community up to 10 years, got a knock on their door or a letter in the mail saying, report to Middletown, you've got to give your DNA and you're going on the registry. And that was their lives changed from that day on, right? Anything they had, chances are they lost. And so what we found is we've got a lot of these guys. We have guys and women who are 14 and 15 years old in that group that today are 40 and 41 years old. And then we've got other, and we do have the one, the offense, we probably call it something different in the state, but where there was back then sex assault 2, probably 2-year age difference. So if it was beyond that, you could be arrested. They changed the law several years ago, and now it's for a sex 2. there's a 3-year age difference. But it's not enough. The harm we're doing, and I've even heard of police departments begging fathers not to have the kid arrested because his whole life will be turned upside down. And there will be, all his potential is robbed. So, yep. David, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. I mean, I guess the couple of things I'd like to throw in there, too, is that really a lot of this building of the registry that took place in the beginning years, this took place outside of a legal process. It was purely a legislative process. This is something where the legislators said, okay, we need to put a larger group of people into the registry, and then just automatically by the label of the crime, just automatically did it without any type of hearing or anything. And that was made possible because of the myths, one you mentioned earlier, the frightening and hide, 80% recidivism, which turned out to be completely false. And so we had basically you have a group of people who had their constitutional rights trampled by this process. And when we pursued this through the legislature, really we got a lot of sympathy and a lot of understanding of the problems that came about by instituting the registry in that way. And so we actually had a surprising amount of support and are very hopeful that we'll be able to get relief for those that are on the registry in that fashion.
What about the retaliation? I hear of horror stories, and I know of one through a friend of mine also in the state of Connecticut, actually. They're on probation, he said, for all these years afterwards. That one guy's got, I forget, I think 10 years special probation. And the probation officer is just out, can't stand him because of his crime, because he's labeled a sex offender. And, I mean, he has him wearing an ankle bracelet now, violated his probation because she found a Lego in his house. He can't go to church because there may be children there. He can't go anywhere anywhere where there's children. He can't, which his crime has nothing to do with children. And right now he's looking at violation of probation. He's going to court. His bond was like $50,000 for violation of probation. Didn't even commit a new offense. These are technical violations. I mean, how many cases do you see of that? And what can be done to stop this and this stigma, or the probation officers that are out there, like they have a policy to violate these guys, that did not give them a chance, to harass them and follow them around and watch them. And I mean, who the hell wants to live like that? I mean, I'd be like, just lock me up, to hell with it. I mean, who would want to live that way? I mean, thank God he's got a job through friends, and he's able to find employment. He's able to buy a house. This guy getting his life back together, and this probation officer just is wicked. I mean, what can be done?
Yeah, one thing I'd like to.
Oops, is that David or?
No, that was me.
David, yes.
I mean, the one thing I want to say, and then Cindy, take it. But I mean, the other thing I want to mention too is it's not just the individual who's on the registry themselves. There are impacts to their entire family, their children, their wives. This is something where children are bullied. There's vandalism against people's properties, not to mention the lack of opportunities for decent housing, decent jobs. Many of these individuals are getting into their senior years and are having a hard time getting medical care. We had a case, I'm trying to remember which state it was, where there was an individual who was on the registry who could not get treated for cancer because he would not be admitted to a long-term care facility and subsequently died because of that.
Wow.
Okay, so this indeed can be a death sentence for some individuals. This is a very serious thing and goes well beyond anything that would be thought to be protective of a community. Go ahead, Cindy.
Go ahead, Cindy. I got another question, but go ahead.
I want to talk about your question, though, about what can be done about it. One standard of justice, we don't employ lawyers. I am not a lawyer. We don't give legal advice. But what I found is over the years, people are reluctant to fight for themselves and to stand up And I get it.
They give up. Yes, they give up, exactly. And that was this individual. We had a good support group, and we were like, no, you just fight it. And here I am down here in North Carolina running for public office, House, state legislative in District 65. And I was like, listen, I'll try to make some calls up there for you. I mean, get your probation transfer, get away from this probation officer, but you can't. They don't want to hear it. They have, like we talked about, this stigma. He's a molester. He's a ripper. He's this. He's that. And no, he's not. And he guy just bought a house. Full-time work doesn't keeps to himself. He lives a lonely life because he has to walk around with a bracelet on his ankle. I mean, it's just terrible. It's, like you said, people. I'm wondering how many people have committed suicide. How many? I mean, or like you said, just give up and just say, throw their hands up and just go back to prison. I mean, what can they do? I mean, is there any other organizations out there that fight for this or stand up for these people with this type of class of offense?
Well, we're so let me just first 1 second. We may be in a position where we're going to fight for something that may be happening to one of the people in my inner circle. And at some point, you have to go for it, because I really wonder if people stood up for themselves back in 1998 when this registry became or came into existence, would it have continued to go as far as it did, right? 1 million people.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, wow, that's a great point.
So it's very few will. I probably had the number of people on one hand that fought, but some people have won. And so I think things have changed. Certainly since I've been in, things have gotten a little bit more progressive. Progressive is a bad word, but in this case, right, what's progressive? But I think there's more understanding by judges. I do believe there's more understanding by prosecutors and public defenders. But the problem is when we continue to shame people, right? And they're shamed from the moment that arrest happens, and their pictures on the local TV, and it's in all the print media, all the social media, that their lives start to change. And that shame just keeps building. And then they go to prison, and they identify as a number instead of a person. And they are treated really harshly by a bunch of judgmental other incarcerated people or corrections officers, right? And then they come out and they get on probation or parole. And we have seen some reasonable people. They're not all bad actors, but unfortunately, sometimes entire offices are filled with the cancer of treating them as subhuman, calling them names, not allowing them to go visit their relatives in hospitals, right? Or not to have friends, not to do this or that. And quite frankly, if you have a good case, I would say this to anybody, at least in Connecticut. I don't know the landscape of other states other than from what we hear. But you got to fight. You got to fight. And if anybody's listening that's directly involved with that person, call me tomorrow. I'm back to work tomorrow, and I'd love to connect with that person. So when we treat people as the other or we shame them, what we've seen, unfortunately, are a lot of mental health issues. Whether they were there or not, they've been exacerbated, and people have such shame. They didn't want to stand with us at the Capitol because they were just, people would hang their head, and you have nothing to be ashamed of. You cannot correct the past, but we can correct ourselves today and forward. And we need to live our best lives, and that's by also taking care of ourselves. and treating our own persons with respect and dignity.
Well, the stigma is not just for those types of. You see a change a little bit with the system, with just any type of crime. You know, with people who get out of prison. You know, this doesn't stem from. I mean, I can't imagine, like I said, with a sexual offense charge, having to register in a registry. I mean, those individuals, male and female, just. I mean, like I said, how can we change this way of thinking that people do have? I mean, as soon as they hear sex crime, as soon as they hear of that, you know what, he's a piece of crap rapist, no matter what, you know, you hear that, and how can we change that type of behavior where, look, isn't America the land of second chances? Isn't this where we're supposed to be forgiving people and allow people to, I mean, you do your sentence, you know, some people are sentenced to jail time, that's it, you do your time. That's it. I think once you do your time and you complete your probation, that's it. You should have no record anymore. That record should be expunged automatically. You know, why can't we get state legislators to buy into that type of thinking?
Well, I think that when you're in a prison, right, there's really a hierarchy inside. And I've talked to people who their crime or offense was unknown, right? 25, 30 years ago, we didn't have social media. And so they were able to stay under the radar. And in order to protect themselves, they would beat the crap out of other people with sex convictions, you know, with the gang, just to stay hidden, if you will. Today, you go to prison, one of the first things they do with the newcomer is they'll call someone up and say, here's this guy's name, what'd he do? And everything's public. Everything is readily available. And so, unfortunately, we get a lot of judgment and stigma from people who have done other offenses, other crimes. And, you know, it's sad. So I'll tell you what we did in our state. The first thing we did is we got out everywhere, and I was sort of the ambassador, if you will, for the brand. And the brand was people who had a sexual misconduct. And so
now, when we talk about sexual misconduct, now let me play devil's advocate here and just, like, for instance, there's a guy out there. What are we talking about here now? We're talking about a 30-year-old guy who raped a 12-year-old little girl. And, I mean, what are we talking about here? So we understand because people need to understand that whatever, like, for instance, if you're sentenced to 10 years in jail, that's what you got. And then you're sentenced to how many years, for instance, go over to the levels of punishment and how long this has to stay on their record or how long they have to register for as a sex offender.
Well, I don't like to contrast crime or offense, but there's mandatory minimums, a lot of them. So it's 1 to 5 years. And beyond that, you know, it's at the judge's discretion, depending on the offense. But quite frankly, we believe, we don't support the myth. We don't support the myth. We believe all people can change. We believe that, you know, that these are one-time offenders, right? And we believe, we know that it's untrue that each person has 100 victims. That's a bunch of hogwash, quite frankly. And so I am different than when I was 19. I've done some really bad things in my life that I'm not proud of. How can you compare? We've all hurt people. So, you know, when
the thing of it is the reason why I bring that up is because now we have this movie out with this children trafficking that just came out with this movie. And so everybody, I'm sure now, they're starting, those guys, whoever traffics children, and you know what? How that's what the messages I'm getting now. What about child traffickers? Shouldn't they go to jail for the rest of their life? And you know, explain the difference between that and the things that you're involved with.
I don't know if anyone should go. You're asking the wrong person if somebody should go to prison for the rest of their lives.
Exactly.
Probably the wrong person there. But what I feel is that if you believe you can change, then how can I judge that somebody else can't change? And when it comes to offending against a child, all right, America's a big freaking country, right? How many millions of people are here? If I offend against a child, I could have been violated by a family member, and therefore it's intergenerational. And until somebody stops the cycle, it could just keep going on forever. Or, depending
there's a behavior
on the
pattern that's handed down, or that for instance, the victim sometimes becomes the offender, like you were talking about earlier. And this is the type of stigma that we have to stop, because there's no assistance, there's no help out there for anybody. They're shamed.
And then there's a big statistic, and it goes from probably 40 upwards to 70% of all child sexual offense is done by other children. So are we going to send children to jail for the rest of their lives when it's restorative and rehabilitative? I mean, we're not already with incarceration. If somebody would ever look at the sex offense industrial complex, in Connecticut, man, we're employing a lot of people because of our community.
Yeah, the thing is, I believe that the focus is completely on the wrong things in terms of this animus that comes about, the emphasis on punishment, because people feel helpless and they don't know what to do about something they're very frightened of. And the facts are that there are many ways you can prevent sexual abuse. There are demonstrated ways that you can successfully stop the next crime from happening. And if people spent even a quarter of the energy, funding, et cetera, on that type of prevention, we'd actually save a lot of trauma in our society. But unfortunately, I think people have been funneled towards these, this retribution way of perceiving it. And it can be emotionally appealing, but it doesn't do anything to protect people who would end up being victimized. And so we need to turn that around. And I think if we do start coming up and promoting ways to actually stop these offenses from happening, people can maybe start moving away from that anger and that fear.
Yeah. And let me give you an example here. As I know, as two of my friends right now are on the Connecticut sex registry. I have one gentleman, his crime goes back to the 1980s. Okay, he has not committed. He's been out of prison now for 15 years, and is doing well, married, but he has to register as a sex offender. As he moves, he has to I think it's like every 90 days. Explain the registry. How does the registry work?
Well, Joe, when our bill passes, and our bill will pass, it's a question of time. As one senator said, we just lost our Senate Bill 1194 on a technicality in the House, and your friend would be automatically taken off the registry, by the way. He's one of those retroactively applied people. So I would put out a shout out to everyone.
He is. Exactly. That's a shame. So you lost the bill on a technicality. What's the process? How do we get that bill back in front of the legislative, or does it have to go all through the process again? It goes back to committee. Explain the legislative process and what people can do. Obviously, call their state legislator and their state senator, and even the governor's office probably, to sign this legislation. But what's the next step here for legislation that you're working on to get this passed?
I would tell them to call One Standard of Justice, 203-680-0567, or send us an email. Because as a community, we have a lot of things we can do, and we're already starting our strategy. The next session is in February, but we're working already because our campaign is called Paid in Full, and we will be reintroducing the same bill. We might actually add on and expand it a little. But the same bill, the same language, which was totally accepted this year, will go forward. But up until that period in February, when the session starts, we have to set up meetings so that people meet their local legislators. We have to do letter writing. We have to do a lot of work. That's all I can say. And so if people would tune in to us and be part of the movement, and we're working on so many projects right now that require money. Donations, please, but we've called our mantra for 2023.
It takes money. It takes money. People don't understand that.
Something for everyone, because we do educational webinars, and some of the top world-renowned, preeminent experts in their field come on to our webinars. We have to do a lot of educating with legislators with the House this year. The House has 151, I think, members. It's a lot of people to educate. So,
wow.
And then we need people at the Capitol with us. We need to do meetings with groups and a legislator, and we need people at the Capitol showing the presence for OSJ's Paid in Full campaign. Because, when I first got in this, they go, you do good work, but you don't have a constituency. And until you get a constituency, you're really not going to make much progress. Well, now we have a constituency. It may not be as large as we want, but it's growing. And I'm going to ask David to speak a little bit about a pivotal point in our Paid in Full campaign with Senator Kissel.
That was a very key moment. And you see, one of the things that's really challenging about working with this type of topic is that people have very strong stereotypical images in their mind about what individuals are, what they're like that are on the registry, and that type of thing. And in the early part of the campaign this past year, Cindy and I spent a lot of time trying to bring some of these individuals who were on the registry and their families to meet with legislators and to show them that these are human beings. These are your neighbors. These are people who are part of this community. And we had a wonderful senator, Senator Kissel, a Republican in Connecticut, who said, okay, fine, I'll meet with a group of you. And he sat down and heard the stories of a number of these different individuals, some individuals on the registry, some of the wives of some of these individuals on the registry, and got to hear the struggles that they are going through now 30 plus years after their offense was supposedly closed. And you could see a change in him. You could see that he could actually listen and hear the damage that is being done by this public policy. And he ended up becoming a very strong supporter of this bill, 1194. When it came to the Senate, he spoke in its favor, drawing comparisons to things like the Scarlet Letter, and felt that it was a real extreme injustice that was done. And what I think is amazing is, he came out and he had such empathy for these people. And after there was another legislator who did not meet with any of the individuals on the registry, who later said, to the press actually, this is not the most sympathetic group of people. And that really agitated me, because these are incredibly sympathetic individuals. The labels are not sympathetic. And if people put down those labels and actually meet with human beings across a table, change can be made. And that's one of the things we'll be doing a lot more this coming year. We're going to be bringing some of these individuals to meet with legislators. We need to talk. We need to get this information out in the open. When Cindy started with OSJ years ago, it was difficult to get anybody to even talk about any of these topics. It was too taboo. And the first thing that needed to be done was to break down those barriers and to get people willing to talk about these issues. And now the next step is to get them to see people. Yeah.
That's the key, talking about these issues. And can these offenders be rehabilitated? That's another thing. It's because, like you said, everybody can change. Everybody can change. That's common sense. So if we have that closed-mindedness about us, but see, then you have the victims. Or do you ever come into backlash from the victims saying no, that disagree with your organization and say no, any type of opposition?
We tend to find that people speak for victims a lot and how they must be offended. There are individuals that actually provided supportive testimony for us who were victims of sexual offenses. The thing is people make assumptions about individuals who've been wronged sexually and tend to only give them, the only lever they have to express or empower themselves tends to be to ask for more punishment. That's the only way they get listened to. And so when you provide alternatives, when there's things like, different alternative forms of justice that can be provided for those individuals, there are pathways for healing that are out there that I think a lot of individuals who've been harmed could benefit from.
So is there in the Department of Corrections, these people that go to prison for this, for instance, what type of offender programs are out there to help rehabilitate people?
Okay, wait. I need to
Let me
answer
guess,
this
zero.
first.
Yeah, you take it, Cynthia. This is a good one.
Take over. Joe, the vast majority of people, I don't want to, it could be 50%, maybe 70% of people who are convicted of a sexual crime. If you run that you are a low-risk person, I'm going to tell you what Dr. Carl Hansen would say. He'd say, go live your life. You don't need prison. You don't need treatment. You don't need community supervision. You need to go live a healthy life and do the natural growth that you would be doing, the development. So it's a misnomer. The lower risk someone is, the more interventions you give them, you're elevating their risk.
Exactly. So what can you break down? I've got one person that sent me a message, and now I've got a couple questions here that they're sending me. What can you break down, for instance, at least in your state, or maybe if you know nationally, what is the recidivism rate as far as people with these types of offenses? I mean, are you finding that they're repeat? I mean, what are they going back to prison? Are they in that revolving door because there's no treatment program, or is it just they're not reoffending?
Well, I can tell you, if you listen to our webinars at onestandardofjustice.org/webinars, Dr. Carl Hansen is there, and he's there with one of our state senators, and multiple ones with Dr. Alyssa Ackerman, who is a restorative justice practitioner, former criminologist. And Carl Hansen would just say, these guys just don't reoffend. So in the state of Connecticut, we have 5-year studies. And they followed the same group of people. And the first one might have been at 3-point-something% recidivism within the 5 years. And the second one might have been at 4.2 or 4.5%. And I remember the victim advocate saying, because the higher one was the second study. And she said, well, it is higher. And the guy that did the research said, what, by half a person? The numbers are so small. So, so numbers you can get numbers to do or say anything you want them to do, depending on your case. But our recidivism in this community is incredibly low. We don't even know. And I think among youthful offenders, the last time it was at 2.2%. So
wow, that's hardly nothing.
David alluded to this. We follow the Johns Hopkins Moore Center of Public Health, Elizabeth Letourneau, and she has an article that I'm happy if anybody collects materials for me to send out. But basically, there's so little attention to given to prevention. Federally, they're giving mere millions, right? A couple million a year to prevention. The carceral system is taking up billions. So how are we ever going to get prevention right when everyone's so keen on post-carceral punishment? That, it doesn't save one victim, quite frankly.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. Well, the Connecticut, for instance, in the state of Connecticut, I'm very familiar with the state of Connecticut, okay? And I actually worked for the government, and I worked inside the state of Connecticut prisons, actually. I worked undercover. I don't know if you know my story or not. But this was in the early 1990s, and back then they had a big gang problem. And it was huge, and we were talking about prosecutors were on the payroll of the Latin Kings. It was just a very large problem, and I was working for the gang intelligence officers in the state of Connecticut. And so I know about inside the prisons what they offer. They offer nothing for rehabilitation whatsoever. But I noticed in the inmate population that you said they get beat up. These people, they go as soon as they get checked into protective custody. They have protective custody units in there, and if they have a sexual assault offense, automatically they're attacked by the gangs. It's like they got a green light on them, And the staff does nothing to protect them sometimes, and until they go to protective custody. How is it today? Because this is 30 years ago, and now here we are, 2023. How has the Connecticut Department of Corrections changed as far as the people, the inmate population, as far as when you had a sexual offense, let's put it this way, in 1991, you were going to protective custody. You were not in the general population. Okay? Yeah, as soon as they found out that you had a sexual offense, you were getting assaulted, sometimes even murdered. How is it today? Are you working with any inmates, or you have any cases where that this is happening, or is it a better situation for them now in there?
David, do you want? I have a comment, but David, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I guess, essentially where I'd say things have shifted within the prison system as I know it in Connecticut is there used to be there even were dedicated facilities for individuals who were convicted of sexual offenses. And what has happened over time is, one, because of the cost and because of the fact they cannot really show really much in the way of benefits because the recidivism rate is low enough anyway. A lot of the programs have been reduced, and the populations now have started to spread to other facilities. So it is something where it used to, one of the thoughts early on with it was because of concern for the welfare of those individuals who were convicted of a sexual offense, to isolate them, to put them out into another area. But now it is much more spread out throughout Connecticut, and you will see within prisons, although I can't give you the stat right now, I would say that a larger percentage of those who are within the prison system are convicted of a sexual offense. But what I want to qualify that with is when you say a sexual offense, you are including everything from indecent exposure to child pornography to a range of offenses, some violent, some not. And despite that, this whole group tends to be seen again as just one type of individual, one type of crime. And I think because of the variation within the group, it's actually proving to be a difficult thing to come up with programs per se, because there's such a variety of causes and such a variety of crimes that you're contending with.
Is it before I send you comments on this, is it more now? What is it more female problem or male problem? I mean, what are the numbers as far as this goes now? As far as the people that are charged with these offenses, is it more prejudicial against men that are because we know the stigma, the male rapist, the male child molester, and they don't, and people don't understand that women are charged with this offense too. So, is that offsetting numbers there, or are they pretty even?
Oh, in terms of men to women, no, women are still very much the minority in terms of who's, for instance, on the sex offense registry. And
okay.
In terms of actually who is committing those crimes, it is really predominantly male, but there are females as well, and I think that's a growing percentage that we're seeing within the system. And can't say for sure whether that's because those are being convicted more on par with the male offenses now, or if there's actually been an uptick in the women who are actually participating in that crime.
Gotcha. Understood. Cindy, you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I'm wondering what I wanted to make a comment about.
That's okay.
So 2 years ago, well, there were several years in a row, we were all supporting ending solitary confinement.
Yes, I wanted to bring that up. Yep.
Reducing so that you cannot be like it used to be. Especially if you were in a gang from the days when you were undercover, they would take a white female as an example, and if there was any gang affiliation, one woman I have in mind spent 7 years. I think she was 19 years old in solitary confinement. And of course, we now know about the mental illness that is brought on by that kind of isolation. And so there are rules, but I know some of the guys are scared because they do want protective custody when they need it. But the solitary, you're supposed to go before a panel to make sure every 7 days or so. Nobody is supposed to be in solitary confinement for very long. But one of the things
I've heard that. I've heard they've done away with that, and they've kind of phased it out. But let me tell you something. Back in the 90s, they built a prison especially for solitary confinement. It was Supermax. It was called Northern. And you were locked down there 24 days.
Northern is shut down.
Thank God.
We closed it a couple of years ago. Yeah, during COVID, we were busy. There were a lot of car protests, and Northern, Northern was a supermax, but what they were doing is making it into, like, if you had COVID, they were sending patients there and throwing them in a cell. If you were lucky, you got 2 Tylenol. If you weren't lucky,
yeah.
Bad treatment. And so luckily that prison was closed down, and hopefully we'll see some more closures as the prison population gets reduced. But you're right. I mean, since I've been on, I haven't counted them, but we have had people murdered in prison. And it's very sad because, everyone thinks they know, but they don't really know anything. They don't. They sure don't. And I worked with a lot of gang members, and I actually infiltrated a gang. Actually, it's a quite unique story, like I said. I actually became president of a gang in the state of Connecticut. I was working for the Department of Corrections and the Connecticut State Police, and this is back in the early 1990s, mid 1990s, and. It was so out of control. They were running around like Indians in there, and the level of assault, the staff that was. I was in the 1994 Carl Robinson riot, actually, where 75 inmates went to the hospital. 2 inmates were killed. The guy that got killed, he only had an 18-month sentence. Was going home in 30 days. And it was just it was terrible. And the other guy was
Oh Lord, another short timer. I forgot. It was two people. One guy from Hartford, another guy from Bridgeport. It was sad, a sad situation. But death does happen, and people don't know what goes on in there. They don't understand. They don't get it. They don't, and like you said, I've seen a lot of people change, and really the system itself is so broken because it's a warehousing system, and that's what it is. That's all it is. It's a warehousing system. There's no corrections. They call it the Department of Corrections. There is zero corrections. Zero. At least when I was in there.
Self-governed. Who is giving them oversight? They're running wild.
Yeah.
They literally get away with murder. And, you know, and so now we have a community oversight committee on prison corrections and prison conditions. But, you know, just like the solitary, right? How we know it's not being implemented correctly. How do you manage that?
Yeah. And people from the outside, once you're inside, people don't understand, once you're inside there, you are cut off from basically the rest of society, and nobody knows what happens in there. It's another world. It's another city. It's another town. Like, that has to stop. There needs to be an oversight. There needs to be an independent oversight civilian population that oversees each and every jail and can monitor what's going on inside these jails. I'm not saying that all the staff is corrupt. There are good staff members, but there is corruption. There's drugs being brought into these institutions. We're working on that. I remember we were working on several staff members that were bringing in drugs at the time. They were gang members, actually. We had one prison guard that was a Latin king. He worked at the Cheshire Correctional Institution. He was allowing inmates to attack other inmates. It was insane. It was insane. It was a total travesty, and like I said, the name itself, corrections, totally misleading. It's more like the Department of Warehousing. These guys would be in there in these segregation units for years and years, locked down, and then they opened up that northern Supermax, and it was just, there were 4-point guys down, strap them down to the bed, and if you had a sexual offense, these guys were targeted. There was a green light on them. I remember staff even allowed beatdowns to happen, and it was just sad. It was just sad.
Well, you know, with most agencies you have in your state governments, you tend to have specific measures of success that you put on the agency. And you say, we expect a certain amount of performance. And I think if you were to go to the Department of Corrections in this state or most states and say to them, demonstrate for me your success, the really only way they can do that is to say, well, we haven't had people escape. That is their
exactly.
That is
good point. Yeah.
That is all they achieve. And since we are so concerned about recidivism, we are so concerned about repeat crimes, what other agency would you expect to actually involve itself or put itself on the line to try to reduce repeat offenses? And so, but they have been able to avoid that. And like you say, it ends up becoming just something which just stores people, and they're now aging, that are getting very sick. You had during COVID a situation where individuals were basically trapped in a viral infected building and dying because of it. And
wow,
all these issues really need to be looked at, and it starts with people saying, let's hold our agencies accountable for the dollars they're spending and for the human lives that they are changing. Is it changing lives for the better, or is it changing lives for the worse? And if it's changing lives for the worse, then something fundamentally needs to change.
A number of years ago, I had on my podcast show, I don't know if they're still around or not. I don't know if you heard of them. I had on my podcast, it was a group actually out of Connecticut. It was called Just Not Another Number. I think it was Not Just Another Number. Did you ever hear of them?
I
this
did,
was back about 10 years ago.
I remember who the players were, and I went and I Googled them. And they still come up with an address in Waterbury, but no names come up. The number's disconnected, and there's no website.
So they fell apart. Wow, that's too bad.
Yeah. I want to give you a story, though. I was thinking about it when you talked about the victim advocates. I was at a state meeting, and it was when the Connecticut Sentencing Commission was looking at the possibility of moving from an offense-based registry to a risk-based registry. And the retro people, that our mutual friend is in the retro group of 800 people, they were talking about giving them relief. And I remember a victim advocate said, because those people have been, on the registry since 1998, right? 25 years ago. But then you could add up to another 10 years of them being offense-free. And I remember the victim advocate saying, how the heck are we going to get victims to come forward from 20 and 30 years ago when we can't even get them to come forward from 2 or 3 years ago? And I think that's very telling, right? Not all victims want the carceral system. The carceral system is really anti-victim. They say they're there for the victim, but it's the state's case, right? And there's a certain benefit to keeping victims for any type of crime a victim, as opposed to helping lift them up, making sure they get high-quality services, and they go on to lead healthy, happy adult lives. So I don't know, but to me that was very eye-opening when I heard her tell that story. Because
is there a victim's advocacy for anyone that, how should I pose this question? Somebody just asked me the question. I don't want to ask it the way they're asking it. Is there any type of, for instance, these people on the registry, once they're placed on this registry and they're off probation or parole and they're off any type of monitoring, okay, I see what this person's saying. What's the registry? How are they monitored when they're on the registry? What is the registry? What is it?
Well, that's great. I'll jump in on this, Cindy, and then just you can correct me as I'm wrong on this. But essentially, all the registry is a database that exists on a website that lists individuals with photo, with residence information, age, some information about the crime committed, although that's very sketchy and inconsistent across the database. And the individuals who are on it are required in Connecticut every 3 months. There needs to be a confirmation made of the address that the individual is staying at. So they are sent a letter. And if they do not return that letter within a certain number of days, I think it's 10 days from the date of the postmark, they actually can be convicted of a felony offense and put back into prison.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's not committing another crime, just because they don't send their letter back in.
Correct. Or the letter gets lost. We have many examples of the letter being lost in the mail, or the agency itself misplacing the mail, and individuals still having their jobs ended, getting picked up in the middle of the night when they're with their families, pulled out of their house, and put into prison.
Oh my goodness! And how long would they now? They're put into prison. They're charged with offense. How many now? If there's, say that the letters, we know the justice system is broken itself. The courts are overwhelmed, and true justice doesn't really happen. Cases aren't heard the proper way. These guys can get sent back to prison for how long? Because they failed to register. Yeah, I mean, is there a minimum mandatory sentence on that?
It is a felony.
No.
I'm thinking it's. Yeah. What is the time? I know 3 years is a possibility.
People go away for 6 months, 1 year. It used to be much higher than that since I've been around, but I think it's lightened up a bit. And what happens is sometimes you'll get a plea deal where they'll ask you to plead guilty to the felony. And that doesn't really help your future, prospects. We don't want people accepting felonies.
Fight it. Like you said, fight it. Yeah, fight it.
A lot of times,
never give in.
Quite frankly, I do want to say that you asked who we work with or other organizations. OSJ
yes, correct.
is an affiliate of, we're the Connecticut state affiliate of NARSOL, and they are National Association for Rational Sexual Offense Laws. And so, have you ever heard of NARSOL?
Yes, I have.
And so we have affiliates, like we're very big in Florida. The states that have very big registries, right? Florida, 50 to 70,000. Texas, 50 to 70,000. California, huge. So Illinois, huge. So Connecticut, even though based on our per capita, we're as high as they are, we're a small state. So we only have probably, they might claim 5,800 to 6,000 people on the registry, but we probably can't find about 800 of them because they've moved out of state, and they're not, they don't have to report to Connecticut. If they're not coming back to Connecticut, then they just go and need to register in their new state. But what happens is, so the Connecticut registry, just like all the other states, are very bloated. We have dead people on it. We have people that moved out of state. So
there's no accuracy. That's what this person just said. The accuracy of this registry, is it accurate? Right. So basically you're telling me it's not.
Exactly.
It's not really. Is there a special unit that monitors this? Basically, that's what this person is. Is there a special assigned unit that handles, like, for instance, you see on TV, this is Law and Order, the sex crimes unit. CSI. They got these special units. So that's what they're asking. Is there a special unit that monitors the registry or handles these types of offenses? And do you work with those people?
Yes, we try to work with people that get non-compliance letters because we want to support them. If it's the state's mistake, we never want the people to claim it was theirs. Yeah, we just don't. And so, but not everyone contacts us. But when they do, and there's a non-compliance situation, we will call the registry together.
That's great. That's great. That's great. My next question, very important before I forget, because I don't want to forget this. It's very, very important. I'm running for North Carolina House of Representatives here in North Carolina. If I was to work, how is there a way that I could work with you, or do you work with other states? How can I introduce legislation similar to what you're trying to do here in North Carolina?
Well, we do have a North Carolina affiliate, and the president of NARSOL resides in North Carolina. That's what I thought, Yeah, Paul Dubling is the attorney who represents, he was one of the NARSOL resources, and about 5 years ago, maybe a little longer, 6 years ago, we asked Paul to file our first lawsuit in federal court to take down a child safety zone, which we ultimately won because the town council took a vote and everyone felt it was unconstitutional, and the town agreed to revoke it. But Paul Dubling, I know we were just on the phone last week. He's a good resource, as well as Robin Vanderwall, sorry.
I'm writing this down, actually. I'm actually writing this down while you're just saying these names, because I'm going to reach out to them. Because I most likely will be elected in my district. Let's put it that way, because the incumbent, I don't think, is going to run again. And he was the only guy that was up against me.
Yeah, no, they're going to want to know you. And, there's lots of things that could be done. So Paul Dubling spoke at the NARSOL conference a week or two ago, and he really emphasized the work we have to do in the legislature. It used to be that the court, everybody's involved or looking for the next lawsuit, right? But while you're doing it, you must work with legislatively. You cannot rely on one or the other. You need we've always learned about three-legged stool advocacy, that you're always educating, you're always litigating, and you're always legislating.
What about along party lines? Is it more? Are you more friendly party lines? Is you get more receptiveness from the Democrats or the Republicans? That's one question. Is this a Republican or Democrat issue? Someone just asked me.
No, I'm not going to answer that because I learned something this year, and I'm a huge protester and amplifier, and
and you're not you bipartisan. Okay, gotcha. That's respectable.
My aim of it in terms of trying to understand people that I don't agree with. Like if the Republicans on the solitary issue said they can't believe that's happening in our prisons. And we had about 20 people from inside prisons speak at a public hearing over the phone. It was during COVID. And I don't, and that kind of attitude is, how can you deny it? These are people with the lived experience. And so, but I've decided that it's my opportunity to, I'm not going to be judgmental. I'm not.
Okay.
That's what I've decided. And
and that's what we're trying to change. And that's what we're trying to change, that judgmental, stereotypical type of behavior that people have. And when I tell people I worked undercover in a prison, you weren't, whoa, you were just a rat. I worked for a government agency, you idiot. The charges were fake. I worked undercover inside the prison. I was actually inside the jail as an inmate. So people don't understand that. Then they're blown away when I show them the book that was written about me, number one, and then the two murder attempts that I almost suffered on my life in the 1990s, and the level of corruption that I exposed with Richard Blumenthal. Lieberman was involved at that time. I mean, it was just so large scale. You wouldn't believe the stories I could tell you off the record.
Well, gee, you'll have to come on our webinar.
Yes. Yes, please.
So
like I said, I've changed my life. I've changed my life. I still am involved with law enforcement. I'm actually going into the police academy here in Greensboro, North Carolina this month actually. And that was my next question. The police departments. You said you had police departments that were begging people that were begging people not to press charges because they understood this ruins their life. And so, what type is that? Is that you get a stereotype of reception from police departments? Because I've first seen fellow cops and people that in the government that have that type of stereotypical attitude towards people with these types of offenses. But then once they get to know the person, or they say, hey, this guy I was with, he had a sex crime back in the 80s, and wow, really, he's a nice guy, and they don't find, they don't understand. That's the problem. It's lack of education. And when you have no education on a subject, you have ignorance, and ignorance breeds what? All kinds of bad things.
Well,
right.
let me just add, based on this year, even though legislators had constituents that they knew for decades in their communities, some of them were going to vote against us. And it sort of really knocked my socks off, because I was thinking, how can they? I mean, why is that so black and white to them? It's all about what they imagine in their heads, but it's black and white. They don't want to give relief to people, or they deny data. Heck, we had legislators, David's own senator, shunned him, would not speak to us. And
wow.
So how do you even open the door a crack, human to human, if they don't even give you 2 minutes of their time?
Yeah. At the same time, I would say that the toughest time, I think, that the toughest perceptions come on behalf of institutions, not individuals. Okay, if you look within, probation, individuals who are involved in working with individuals on, who've been convicted of sexual offenses, who have done this for a while, and they're a probation officer, oftentimes find themselves not really in agreement with the way things are laid out legally, the restrictions that are required and so forth. I mean, they just don't want to come up against their own institutions to say this is not really working, because you just don't want to do that when you're involved in law enforcement. And the same thing with legislators. We had legislators tell us numerous times, individual legislators, look, your bill at providing relief to these individuals on the sex offense registry, I think it makes sense. I don't like the registry, but I'm going to vote against that bill because my constituents would kill me. As an individual, they felt that it made sense. These are all pretty intelligent people. They've read a lot. They know the facts. But the institution itself is afraid of what the media might make out of any type of relief that's given, afraid of any, an exceptional bad case that might happen it would then reflect badly on them, and just general what their opponent might try to raise at the next election. So
I have somebody in my chat room. I just want to cut you off right there real quick. I have somebody in my chat room because I've gotten several messages already that they made this comment again, and because of the media surrounding this latest film that just came out, The Sound of Freedom. And now here we are. We're going to stereotype all individuals that everyone out there is abducting children and they're raping children. And even so, these people that have this problem, people have to understand something. These people you're not going to win the argument of put them in prison, lock away the key, and that's it, because all these people are going to be back out in society with us. And wouldn't you rather have a treatment program or organizations out there that are fixing the behavior that causes this type of would you call it a mental illness or mental behavior? How do you classify someone that's involved in child pedophilia, for instance, or someone that was raised abused and then became an abuser themselves? Would you consider, what kind of illness? I mean, how would you classify that?
DSM probably. It would be a pedophilia, or I don't know all the diagnoses, but I do know that we over-pathologize people and we do make mountains out of molehills. Now, when it comes to sex trafficking, about 5 years ago, we were working on a bill. We opposed it. Connecticut wanted to put our youth on the registry, 7 to 14 years old, of nonviolent offenses. The registry was intended to do the Megan Kankas or the Jacob Wetterlings. It was supposed to be a law enforcement tool of only the most serious, heinous offenses, so that if a child was abducted, and everybody, they would have a tool ready to go to scour the area close to wherever the incident occurred. I do know when we were looking at the numbers from NCMAC, what is it, the National Children, Exploited Children and whatever, John Walsh's organization, that in reality they were claiming thousands of children were.
Thank you for clarifying that. I had a big argument about that.
Yeah, the statistic that year was about 65 to 80. And that why do children leave home? Because they're physically, emotionally, and sexually abused. Because, the parents are addicts, so again, neglect. So they're runaways.
And the numbers are inflated. The numbers are inflated. 97% of these children that are supposedly abducted or enslaved are found in America. I put the number out there. I remember I got to put some numbers out there. Nobody would believe me. It was a big debate on one of these podcast shows, and I was like, I got the numbers right here. All this millions and millions are being trafficked, and they got these underground tunnels, and there's sex trafficking going on. There's sex, a bunch of nonsense. Okay, conspiracy theory stuff.
This came up a few years ago. If I'm a John and I go and I hire a sex worker, right? It is that people who do sex work, some of them want to be where they're at. That is their profession. But the difference was that if a person, a consumer, goes to a sex worker and unbeknownst to him, it's usually a he, is with somebody under the age 18, that's sex trafficking, right? But you don't know the person's under 18. They wanted to take that person, the consumer, and as a first-time punishment, because it was called sex trafficking, give the person 25 years incarceration. Now, another way to look at that is that consumer, even if the girl was under the age of 18, but he didn't know it, she's living off of the money he's providing. Worse things could have happened. So it's just so nuanced. There's nothing black or white about this. And I do need to say this, Joe, in case I get off the show and I forget to say it. The registry is a failed public policy. It was intended to prevent future crime and keep our community safer. And that's a bunch of bullshit. So it is a failed public policy, and that's it. If I remember for nothing.
And that's a big thing here, and that I'm trying to. I'm going to fight against the registry. That's a big thing that I'm at odds with my local sheriff down here. They wanted this registry. It's failed. It's failed. When I first came to North Carolina, I dated a girl that was in college, and I remember she was on the computer. She came back out. We were all having dinner at her mom's house, and she came back out. And she goes, "Do you know, Ma, that how many registered sex offenders there are in the area?" And I was like, I said, "Oh, hang on a second here. What are you talking?" I said, "Well, what crimes are? Let's look at their crimes. Really, how many of them are violent rapists that were out raping little children?" Guess what? Out of 68 in our area registered, not one. It was all indecent liberties, which means indecent exposure, a guy taking a leak in the woods, something like that. That's why they're under registry.
Yep. And Joe, how about this? I'm tired of refuting underreporting and re-victimization, quite frankly, when we're not doing it. So here's the thing. What about when it comes to we have given partners, the majority probably women, but not all, a weapon of mass destruction, whether it be a custody fight over money, over he dumped me and went to a younger woman. They even get, some people even get their children to say something about the other parent. And I've been exposed to guys, and it's heartbreaking.
Happened to me. 14 years in a relationship. We break up. She gets a restraining order. Never put a hand on her. Never. Now I have a restraining order, domestic violence. Guess what? My entire career is on jeopardy. I have to, and thank God it all worked out for the best in the end. I put my faith in God on that one. And guess what? We're back together. And but 5 years ago I was the monster in the community.
Yeah.
Lost my 2 kids. I had supervised visitation with my kids. For what reason? I'm asking the court, why? Why? I've done nothing wrong. I had an argument. We had an argument. We weren't getting along. We needed counseling. That's all it needed. It took. That's all it took to fix the relationship. Instead, it got all blown out of proportion in family court, and again, lost my children for 6 months. Devastated. I was devastated. And then the financial hardship. Oh, thank God I was able to hire a lawyer, or I can imagine what would have happened to me. I can just imagine the people without the financial resources or a backing out there. Luckily, I was a small business owner. We're getting ready to run for public office. I was attacked, and people saw through the lines. And thank God it worked out for the best in the end. But still, This is how we can smear someone's name and destroy their life. And it's terrible. It's terrible. And it has to stop. It has to. And this registry needs to be abolished. How can we get this registry in each state abolished? What do you recommend we do other than call our legislators? What can we do in community groups or webinars that you're hosting? What else can we do other than, is there any other organizations out there other than yours nationally or just be involved in our state locally? What's the best tool to get rid of this nonsense?
Okay, for Connecticut, for anybody listening, we need money. If we have money, we're ready to go forward with some big ideas. One of the things we need to get the legislators, the mass, critical mass supporting us, and we're on our way there. And we need to get the average citizen, people who are even reasonable and look at this reasonably and more nuanced. They don't understand the amount of harm being done to this group. You know what I mean? Like, I've met people at nonprofit fairs, and, you know, I mean, we're all over the state, and they have no idea that people aren't allowed to go to the movies or people aren't allowed to go to the beach. Can you imagine not going to the beach for 10 years? Or, you know, or you're not allowed to, you know, they think your restriction is only tied into where you live.
Can't go to church. Can't go around a school. You know, we talk about gun-free zones and everything. If you have any type of, again, sexual offense or sexual charge in nature, or you cannot go within so many feet of a school or you'll be arrested. Imagine that. Imagine if I was arrested when I was 19 years old for dating a 15-year-old girl, labeled a sex offender, and I couldn't go anywhere near a school for the rest of my days, or how many years it is you're on the registry. Some states, I think, it's a lifetime.
That's a bunch of bullshit anyway, because Jill Levinson, Dr. Levinson out of Florida, we know it's proven that it has to do with social, not geographic, you know, what are they, proximity. So it doesn't matter where you live, it's who you know.
Yeah.
And that's the prevention David was talking about. We all have to become not crazy, because we don't want to instill fear in our children. We want to start teaching people in our circle just to be a little observant and any changed behavior. I mean, really, I'm a parent. How many times have I been not present for my child? Right? Mindfulness. Like, just pay attention more.
And that's another. The registry is the key tool that they use also that just destroys people's lives. And so abolishing this registry has to be done. And now, is it just a state registry, or is there a national registry? I mean, now, nobody's trying to downplay, because I'm getting some messages here in my chat room. Nobody's trying to downplay the fact that there is bad things that happen sometimes to people. Look, crime is a norm of our society. This is any open and free society is going to have crime. That's just what I've found out, what I've studied throughout my life, and being involved with the correctional institutions, so-called correctional institutions, and being involved with the government and the things that I've seen and witnessed firsthand, okay? And I believe me, I've walked and dealt with the worst out there in society. But guess what? Each and every single person can change. Every single person I came in contact with could change. It's a matter of decision-making, your environment, what type of surroundings you have, the number of opportunities you have in life, and you just said a key thing, your social status in society. Now, a lot of that, and that's where a lot of these gangs were bred out of, because they would come from the inner cities or inside the prisons. That's where they were born, at least in the state of Connecticut. And look at what you have. Instead, if we change that atmosphere to a more positive atmosphere of preventative and educational means and work on that instead of punishment, imagine what difference we can make in our society.
Huge.
Yeah.
One of the things I would say, too, that, you know, in terms of if you have listeners there that are saying, okay, I agree with this somewhat, I really want to try to do what I can to dismantle the registry. What I would really recommend that they do is, most states, I believe, have a NARSOL affiliate. Find out who your NARSOL affiliate is within your state contact them and see how you can get involved with their efforts to do this. That's what you can do on the institutional level. Then what you can do on the personal level is it's kind of trying to do what you can to defang the effects that the registry has in your community. Okay, that means like do not support things like the little warning signs that might go up on Halloween at every door that happens to have someone that might be on the registry. Do not support, if you have an apartment building, do not support someone who would screen your applicants for being on the sex offense registry. Allow people an opportunity to actually have housing and to be an individual, find out who they are. It's kind of when you buy into this whole thing.
Yeah.
You know,
I agree. I've got a caller here from the state of Connecticut. I recognize the number. He might have some questions for you. I have to screen my callers, of course, but this caller I do know. I recognize the number. I'm going to bring him on. Okay.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Go ahead. Area code 377. Excuse me. The last three digits of your number is 377. Go ahead. I know who this is.
Yeah, this is
You're
Dr.
muted.
Ventura. Hello. Joe.
Oh, is that
Hello.
TV? Is that TV?
Yes. And Cindy, how are you?
Good. How are you? I've missed you at the Capitol.
Well, I've been very sick. I went through COVID for 11 days and then got out and had blood clots, and then I had to have a stent. I had a 99% blockage in my carotid artery, and I had a stent put in my neck and one in my shoulder, and then 30 days later I had a triple bypass.
Oh, my God, Peter, I'm so sorry.
Well, okay, I've been down. You've been on my heart. And, I'm still, the church is going in Woodbury, and the prison ministry. There's 38 students now studying for associate's degrees, and others doing, courses. And so things are still going ahead as forward. Yeah, and I agree with everybody. I think the people. I don't think the people in the state of Connecticut realize the statistics, and I don't think most people around the country, that when you get the national statistics on crime, the least of recidivism rate is sex offenders. And when Richard Blumenthal tried to run for governor of this state, Pedro Morales wrote an article with those statistics. And Blumenthal was running on that primarily on that registry. And when the statistics came up and it showed Blumenthal a liar, he lost a lot of votes. But unfortunately, it's what the registry does is it causes fear, and it's an emotional, political tool to get elected, and so I have a lot of organizations that have contacted me over the last 2 years and have asked me to get involved. And the problem is that they're so spread on so many different issues that if you're going to go after the registry, let's get that done first. And then once we accomplish that, let's move on to the next thing. And so because they're so spread out, they're really not accomplishing anything. They're getting hits here and there, and they're able to network and meet people, such as, we have Senator W. up here, who's a great guy, but even in his right, he won't, step out and make a statement, and he needs to.
I disagree with you, Peter. If that's from New Haven, are you talking New Haven?
Yeah.
Oh, no, then you're not up to date with our work. That is like a dead wrong depiction of the work that OSJ has done. We started.
No, I'm not saying OSJ.
No, but I'm talking about our senator who has played a key role in partnering and furthering our movement, because he knows this at depth level compared to other people. Okay. So, David, do you want to add anything? I mean, I know Peter's not calling him out, but that would be a really grave mistake to depict. He's done a great job, and in fact, we'll be meeting with him again this coming week. Okay. We're dedicated to run our bill.
That brings me up to date, and I certainly appreciate that. The other problem that I had, which you and I will discuss privately, was that some of the attorneys that were involved with you may have to remember I had a criminal background before I picked up the charge that put me on the registry. and I was a bodyguard and chauffeur, and I was involved with a lot of people that were on the take. And there's some people that I know more about than you know about, to say. And I'm not sure that they and I would get along. I
don't know, and you don't know. I mean, that's a hard statement. I can't support that statement either. I know a lot. I understand behind scenes. Yep.
Yeah. And I all I'm saying is I might be in conflict of interest with them. It's not that I wouldn't like to sit down with them, because my life has changed, and my whole life is in a whole different direction. And so you have some great people on your team, but I would, there's a couple of them, a few of them that I would have to sit down with on a one-to-one. And
well, that's the problem, Peter. That's what the problem we were talking about, Peter, is that the past consensus of people and their attitudes or belief or standard of belief that they have is all over the place. Is that people have changed, and that's what we have to do, is try to change people's way of thinking about individuals and about their past, and no matter what has happened.
Correct. I've been out 13 years.
And that's why I'm trying to be less judgmental, Joe, and more open-minded about all people. That's just a bigger educational opportunity for me. And we've started to take a look at the people who brought the registry in 1998, and the people who opposed it in 1998. And somebody who will remain nameless on this show, who I always considered sort of an enemy, not even a frenemy, I'm going to be approaching that person, because that's what we have to do.
I agree, Jane. I've heard great things. I've been on some of the webinars that you had Narsal National. I've been on the webinars that you sent me links.
Those are OSJ
webinars. I sat quietly in the back and listened to a lot of that. And I think a lot of it's dealing with victims. And so I just said, we're not really solving problems. We're solving interpersonal relationships between victims and offenders. But as far as getting onto this registry thing, I think that we need a narrow focus on that. Let's burn that. Let's get that out of there. It's got to go. Here's a guy like me. I can't even go in front of my window and iron my clothes with a shirt off, because I'm afraid somebody might say I'm doing something wrong. And I shouldn't have to live with that stigma.
Yeah. Well, one person mentioned in the chat room, another comment, and again, that's not true, the statement that, actually, I think she might call in, actually. She's down in the state of Florida, made some really good questions, but also made a comment about the registry, that it don't, that if it don't work, she understands that. But again, the narrative being said here is that the people have a misconception about the number of crimes that are actually being committed. Everyone thinks that we have this big, large problem of sexual perversion out there, and children are being snatched up on every corner, and they're being trafficked underground, and that your child could be taken at any moment. We have to stop this.
Well, I was personally involved in California with a girl from Japan, from Okinawa, who was being trafficked, and my wife and I rescued her, and the FBI were involved. And, we got her mother over here from Okinawa, and I got her a 24-hour emergency passport to get back out of the country. But that's one of a couple. And I was also involved. If I find the lady's card, I'm looking through the cards now, I'll give the information that people can contact this lady. She's the Bilateral Safety Coordinator. Here it is. Bilateral Safety Coordinator Coalition. She's the Executive Director. Her name is Marissa B. Ugart, Garte. And you can reach her at www.bscccoalition.org. And she's in California, and she's involved a lot with rescuing people and that type of thing. If somebody's really interested in learning something about that, she can give that information. It is a problem in our country, and especially in California along the Mexican border. That's what
I wanted to bring up. That was my next question to Cindy there. Again, are you? I think I might have already asked this, but are you receiving any type of I guess you could say pushback, where I know you said in the beginning it was very difficult because people were shut down to the ideas that, and you said you're involved with a lot of protests protests and whatnot. Can you give me an example of some of the things that you've been fighting for over the years, or just how you've gotten involved with this this battle? Because really, I don't think I've asked that. You know, what started you out in this battle to fight for and start this one standard of justice?
Well, like most of us, we're volunteers, and most people get involved because we're directly impacted. We're either one of the people who are formerly incarcerated, or we're a family member. And so, I believed the worst day of my life was when somebody I loved was sentenced. But I quickly learned that they give punishment retroactively. You know, if you can take somebody from a 1-year law enforcement only registry up to lifetime, then that's retroactive punishment. And so I decided that something had to change. And so as a innocent, you know, I went up to the person I love, went to prison, and 2 weeks later, I was attending my first state meeting. And
wow.
The only way you can get involved or make a change, rather, the only way to make a change is direct involvement. You know,
boots on the ground.
The state of Connecticut, from what I understand, is unique in the way they handle public hearings. If the bill gets out of screening, the proposed bill, they have a public hearing. And sometimes, like with vaccines or the anti-vaxxers, that, you know, you get 200 to 500 people showing up at the Capitol, or physician-assisted dying, right? Another huge one. They've been working on that since 1994, I believe, and can't get that bill. And it was a great bill from what I read this year. I was disappointed it didn't get out.
Wow. Cindy, I've got just not to cut you off. I'm sorry, because time permitting. I've got one other caller here that I'm going to let on ask a question if you don't mind, and then we'll have to get to closing comments here. Just give everybody closing thoughts and take a few minutes. Just take a deep breath and talk to the audience and tell them what your deal is, what you want to see done, and how people can get involved, and most importantly, how they can donate and support your organization. Let me take this one caller here, 407. Go ahead. Welcome to the podcast. I know who this is, and what's your statement or comment or question?
Well, it's an interesting discussion because there's no easy answer, and I don't think we truly get to where what the root cause or what's causing all this problem to begin with. I mean, when it comes to the registry, anything the government manages, well, we all know what happens there. And so it was an attempt to try to address the problem. But you get to the basic, and I happen to know people personally, a man whose stepdaughter accused him of raping her because she was mad about something he did or whatever else. And so I understand there's a lot of false accusations out there. It's probably one of the most difficult things to deal with. But I'm also right now seeing a society, a culture that is totally messing with these kids and their sexuality, the transgendering, the drag queens, the naked men on bikes. And I mean, the insanity that is out there right now. There is no easy solution for this. I don't think you can simply say, no, you don't do this or that. It's a very, very complicated thing to deal with. But we need to get to what really – how many of these kids actually run away and how many of these kids are abducted. I did see the movie, The Sound of Freedom, excuse me, based on a true story, how bad it is, how widespread. Then I see and hear these cases where the mother and the families in Texas, the mother is dressing her little boy as a girl. The mother, to me, it looks like this is a mother who's a psycho who wants a daughter, and so she's going to make one of her little boys a girl. He doesn't want to be a girl. He wants to go fishing with Dad. But she goes and takes him to California. I mean, there's so much insanity of what is going on with our children and sexual abuse and sexuality and everything else. It's not a simple answer, and we've got to get back to the culture. What has caused us to do this to these people, one way or the other? What is the lack of faith when we took God out of school? You know, it's a very, very difficult thing. While I can appreciate you're trying to come up with a solution here, I don't know that you've come up. I don't know. I'm not really sure what the right answer is. I'm not sure. Just trying to say that, you know, okay, you went to jail for what you did to this girl or boy, whatever it was, and now you're all cured and never again. And whether you should be allowed to be near a school, there's so many aspects to it. It's just I don't think it's as simple as what you're making it sound. And that's again, I've seen some personal cases where I knew some weird stuff happened like this too. I don't know. I just keep saying, keep praying for the soul of this country, because right now we have truly lost our way, and I think this is a good example of it. I don't know if that helps any, but that's I feel frustrated with the situation and very sad for the children.
All right, Cindy, you heard that comment? Go ahead.
I'm going to say something, and it's going to be very harsh, and it's pretty black and white. But when I meet people, and I'm not saying you are, ma'am, from Florida, but people that are just so adamant about making something like over pathologizing. We have to call everything something. So a lot of people actually go to a sexual offense because they could be in a blackout and they don't know what they're doing. They could be dysregulated because of a bad marriage, or maybe I fell off my motorcycle and I got addicted to a prescription drug. There's so many things. It could be poverty, and so it's just another way for us to act out, human beings, because of a bad environment and a bad climate. There's a movie called Untouchable. Have you seen it?
No, I have not.
And the man, I don't know if he's a North Carolina or Virginia man, but he said every time his baby sister went into the hospital, his father's penis was in his mouth. There's just so many things. And I think things always happened. It's just that now there's so many humans populating. But here's what I would say, and it's very harsh. Would you rather have a dead child or a child that was sexually molested? If we can get over the stigma of what happens to somebody who is a victim, right? We're harming that victim. I remember there's a story about an article, and the person was talking about a violent rape, and the comments, the people's comments. One gentleman said, "She'd be better off dead. How do you get over that? You can never overcome that." And so a victim of rape wrote, "I am a victim of the same thing, and I'm happy I'm alive." So there's just, it's just complicated. It's so nuanced. And trauma treatment, that was one of the first things I learned, how effective trauma treatment is for sexual abuse. And the other thing that we're doing, and Joe and I think, and David had talked about it, how the whole carceral system, whether it be domestic violence or sexual harm, splinters families. They don't bring families together. And that's a mistake. Because even in domestic violence, it's not that the couple may recouple again, although in Joe's case they did. But the point is that normally there's children involved. And we have to learn to be happy, healthy adults and show the children that we put the children first, and we have to parent them together. And so if we've got this domestic violence thing going in the schism, how do you do that? And so we're a very big proponent of restorative justice. And there's another webinar on by Marlee List, and Dr. Alyssa Ackerman, who herself identifies, and she's originally from Florida, as Jill Levinson is, identifies as a victim of violence, of a rape. And she is now a restorative justice practitioner. Because
and that question you asked, Cindy, about that question you asked, rape or death, is that's the question that a lot of these victims face, and that's a lot of positions we as a society put these people in, where because they've been assaulted. Now the stigma that they have is just as bad as what the stigma is with the offender. I mean, we're a judgmental society, and it has to stop.
Yes, and all these triggers that we, the society, do because of our fears and our moral compass and our yuck factor. And I'm going to tell you one more story, and then I'll quit here. I was in a meeting, and it was the anonymous kind, and there was this beautiful girl talking and telling us her story. And she was a chronic relapser, alcohol and drugs. She was now 25 years old and had been sober 7 years. But she was molested by her grandpa, probably beginning 7 to 12 years old. So everybody in the audience gasped. You know, it was like they were just stunned and just mortified by what they just heard. And the girl goes, no. It's Thanksgiving in 3 weeks. And the entire family, including my grandpa, are sitting down to dinner. And I didn't know how important that story would become to me years later when I got involved in this. And I would have liked to have talked to her about what process they went through together as a family to heal. But it's possible. And in order to lead healthy, happy people and communities, that's what we have to strive for, not the
That's right. Amen. Amen to that. Cindy, I've got one other person here who wants to make a quick comment here because we are running low on time here, but I can get one more person in here real quick. Ask your question or make a comment. 909, go ahead.
Yes, hi. This is Suzette calling from California. Is the registry just a blanket thing as far as if you get convicted that follow under the law that you're a sex offender now, so everybody has to register, or do they have categories of registries, like low level, serious level as far as where these people are living, or I'll shoot my alarm. Anyway, that was my question, because I think that I think that the registry should have, if we're going to have one, which we need one for the safety of our children, but we don't have to fearmonger. There should be levels of sex offenders, and those levels, the lower levels, shouldn't be reported as far as to the public, but they're still on file just in case. So that's my question.
Can I ask you a question before we answer that? Are you Suzanne?
Yes, Suzanne.
Is she?
Yes.
So here's my question, and I say this to legislators too. What if I'm right? What if, and it's not only me, but what if my community and world-renowned preeminent scientists, researchers, criminologists say the registry is a failed public policy? It does not keep our children safer, and it does not prevent future crime. If that were true, would you, if you believe that, would you say we need a registry?
Well, what I would say is that you can't predict the future. And people do have problems. People have issues. They may be going through something that, as you say, made them act out, but they had a decision. They made a decision when they chose to act out. And so how are we to know that that may not happen again or may happen again? So that's why I suggested as far as different levels or categories of sex offenders. You have those that have a real problem that are working on rehabilitation, okay? Then you have another level that really, as far as, maybe had a girlfriend that was a year younger than them, somebody, their father or whatever, called the police, and so that person now, is convicted of being a sex offender, and it was consensual between the couple, even though she was underage by a year. But so that would be a low level type thing, if at all.
So Suzanne, you want to harness 1 million people over something they might do. What about all these other, we talk all the time. We don't believe, I'm anti-registry. I'm also anti-prison, quite frankly, not the prison we know today. What about, how, let's see where I was going with this. So you want a registry, even though we know, just say, for example, it's a failed public policy, right? Do you know that prior to registries, the recidivism rate, decade after decade after decade, pre and post registry, is exactly the same?
So what's the harm of keeping an eye on the high level sex offenders? It would actually reduce that list, that registry, and make it more fair for those that, as a situation I gave, or example that I gave to you, could live their lives and not have to be stigmatized, because that list wouldn't be made available to the public because of their situation. But I think they need to be examined on a per case basis rather than making a blanket registry and destroy lives. But I also think that still working on it and able to be among the public and still have urges, and as you say, will act out maybe, or they did act out on that particular day. We don't know. And what if I'm right and they do act out again? Now we've got a victim that's been injured and traumatized for the rest of their life because we took that chance of not, keeping an eye on them, or having at least public know, watch your kid, or, they don't, I just don't understand why it has to be a blanket registry.
I don't think the registry, though, I think the point, though, Suzanne, is the registry wouldn't prevent that anyway. It wouldn't prevent anyone. It's not, unless we have a policeman sleeping under everybody's bed during, or walking side by side with them, registering or classifying a group of citizens based upon what they might do because of the mistakes they made years ago. I see your point on the level of offenses, and that's why we have courts, and that's why we have judges, and that's why we have, these places that make these judgment calls when they sentence somebody. But once they complete their sentence, this constant of let's keep them in the system, in the revolving door system, so we can get them if we have to. How could that? I just don't. That hasn't worked.
It's
not
a failed
if public
we'll
policy.
Get them if we have to. Wouldn't you rather get them if they did do harm to somebody rather than not get them? As far as we can't locate this person and he's out on the loose or she's out on the loose.
Okay. All right. That's a good point. Go ahead, Cindy.
The next crime, the next sexual harm that's being done as we're on this call is by people we don't know. The ones on the registry, they did their one and done. They're done. They don't reoffend. And so what if we took those billions of dollars and we're harming their children? Their children are getting beaten up in schools. They're depressed. They're being they're shunned. What if
what
we
are the
took
statistics
all
on
that
that?
money on registry and put it into prevention? That will help what you're talking about.
I think that's what she's trying to get at, Suzanne. I think that's what Cindy's trying to do, is trying to use the resources that's being wasted on this registry, because it's a waste, failed public policy, and put it towards treatment, put it towards programs.
If we reduce the list to get rid of the low level, then we don't have to worry about that and use that money towards preventative. But what are the statistics on the children that you say are getting beaten up and are ostracized and shamed or whatever?
That it's anecdotal. Like we know from surveys. I know people. I know a 14-year-old girl got beaten up by her friends on the playground because her dad was on the registry. So I want to go back, though, to the what were you talking about? So new.
So you're willing to let all these what is it? How many sex offenders that are out there that could be high level, or that are high level?
Example.
You want them to not be on the registry.
She's going to give you an example. She's going to give you an example. So,
okay.
Cindy, basically the question is, she wants to categorize everybody. She wants to say, Cindy, what she's trying to say is first degree, second degree, third degree. Okay, first degree, we don't monitor them. Second degree, we don't monitor them.
Well,
third degree, we do monitor them.
Of the, like somebody with, a younger person, that's not even a crime. We've got to, become more savvy about what is happening with the laws and do our own research. So,
if I can jump in really quickly.
So I wanted to tell you, I was on the phone with a psychologist, I think yesterday or Saturday. Was it Saturday? And we have about 5,800 people on the registry. And I said about 800 don't even live in the state anymore. So 5,000. So he said to me, well, if we, because we don't want a registry, we don't even want a law enforcement registry. Those people need to go live their lives. That's how we create healthy people. But he said that probably in our state, he said 50 to 100, and he thinks closer to 50 would be people that would have to be on a law enforcement only registry. We're really, the fear has taken over common sense. And so I always ask people, if you have children, when do you start sex education, right? It's a huge argument right now between the schools and the parents. Parents don't know how to communicate to their children. I didn't. My parents didn't do it to me. But if we need to start with our children when they're in the bathtub, probably between 6 months and 6 and 12 months. And if we don't,
we have to prepare them for rape.
And the other thing is that people who commit sexual crimes, maybe a few of them, that top 1, 2, or 3%, some of them have urges. But it's not like I'm a vampire and I go and suck somebody's blood and then I've gotten a taste for it and so I keep going. It's not like that at all. We're really misrepresenting it and misunderstanding it. So anyway, I have a lot of friends.
I think that David, he wanted to jump in there and comment. Go ahead, and then I'll do closing thoughts. Everybody can make their final comments. How's that?
Yeah, well, it's fine. I mean, just my 2 cents on that, I guess. Cindy already mentioned the fact that we have the idea of law enforcement only registries versus public registries. And I think the concern about publicly based registries is they decrease the quality of life and they cause harm to those individuals on it. And if you have an individual who has had a history of crime, you are not decreasing the risks with them by actually having them not able to hold a job and not able to have decent housing. And if you put people in situations where they are outside of society, you're actually increasing the risks that society is going to have to deal with because you have a large group of people who now are effectively shut out of society. So the public registry, I think and again, that's something that there are studies on. It's not like this is something that's an opinion thing. If you even Google it, look at Wikipedia, the subjects on it. They talk about the failures of the registry there. So, it's there. The other concern is once we start putting up those lines and saying, but I want to know about my, the neighbor and, I just need to know because this is important for me. Well, what you're doing now is you're going to start going down a slippery slope where we will have lots of registries. And Cindy and I have actually fought legislation in Connecticut for registries of people who've abused animals, for registries for people who've done domestic violence, registries for people who have done elder abuse. Basically, you have a government that is very willing to produce lots of registries for lots of different crimes. And where are you going to draw the line of what crime is serious and what crime is not? You will create a country in which everyone is going to have some sort of letter on their chest about what makes them undesirable to other groups of people in their community. And it's an unhealthy way for society to develop. And so public registries just need to end. And that's my 2 cents on that.
Okay, I'm gonna get to close. Cindy, I'm gonna give you the last word. Hang on, Suzette. Hang on. I'm gonna give you everyone time for me. I'm gonna give everyone their closing thoughts or comments right now. Suzette, I'll start with you. Cindy, you'll be last. I'll let you say your piece at the end here. Take as long as you want at the end. But I'll move up the line from the people that I have on the line right now. Suzette, go ahead. I'm gonna give you the floor first. Go ahead.
The court cases are public, so if anybody wanted to know, as you said, they can do their research, whether online or go to their county courthouse to get that information if it makes them feel safer, and awareness for their children. Another thing is we don't have actual statistics as far as you brought in the kids and they're being beaten up at school and they're being shamed. We're using that, tugging at the heartstrings to not put people who should be at least monitored, yes, they have a life, but they screwed up, and this is what they have to do. But I think that if they maintain themselves, as far as for 5 years or whatever, then they can be removed from that registry and they can, live their lives. But because it was something that triggered them, that made them act out. Whatever that trigger was doesn't mean that it won't happen again later down the road. And I'm not saying it will happen tomorrow if they did it today. It could be 5 years from now, but that trigger is still there. And so, because they hadn't worked it out. And so, yes, they do need treatment, but there are those that are mentally deficient to where no amount of treatment is going to fix them. And so I think that should be taken into consideration as well. So as far as gun registries, great. I'm glad I hope you are for gun registry, or not for gun registry, that you're against those as well. Any kind of registry you mentioned. And by the way, I would choose, no disrespect whatsoever, but the Wikipedia, when you mention Wikipedia as a source, that's not a good source. Because regular people fill those out and lock people out and everything else. They're not a reliable source. So anyway, thank you very much, Joseph. And
all right, thank you, Suzette. Appreciate the phone call. Closing thoughts, 407, you next. Go ahead. You get to go next. You've been there waiting patiently. Thank you for the call tonight. And thank you again, Suzette. Go ahead there, 407.
Yeah, I would truly need several hours to go over this and to give it the proper attention it does, because it's not as simple, it's not as black and white as what I'm hearing here. Every case is different, and how you would treat that would be different. How you treat the victims would be different. There's so many aspects, and there's so many ways we as a society, to be honest, common sense is a wonderful thing. It's only common sense, but sense isn't common. When you go out there and look and see the abuse that people do to each other every day, whether it be the sexual abuse or emotional abuse in many other ways, it's just not as simple as this. Now, a registry, I can see that. I can definitely see the problems with that one. So I'm not saying that's what the solution is. I'm not saying that's a bad policy doesn't mean you go and come up with more bad policy. I would really need to have a much better understanding of what you think you're going to do here. And you can't go and ignore the victims, and you can't go and just act like, well, they only did it one time. Well, they only did it twice. I mean, there's just much more to it. There's very much more, and I could not possibly go into it here. And I'm talking about abuse, what we even do to senior citizens in these nursing homes. Do you want to talk about abuse? It's just what we do to each other. It's just very sick. And we need to get back to why are we doing this to each other? What has gone wrong with the human psyche that is okay with abusing people at all different levels? And when you go after the children because they're more vulnerable and weaker than when an adult does this, that's even sicker. That is a higher crime, if you ask me. But it's not a simple answer, and I don't feel like I've gotten a very good answer here on the show tonight. Sorry.
All right. Well, maybe you'll get one here before we wrap it up. But appreciate your comment, though. That's what it's about. We're here to talk about this issue and bring it out to the forefront, because we're not talking about it across the country, and there's victims on both sides. And that's what we're talking about. And the larger part of the victims are really the people that are in this registry. It's a shame. I've seen it happen firsthand. I have friends that are on the registry, and it's destroyed their lives. But 203, go ahead. Closing thoughts? Peter.
Is that me, brother? Yes.
Yeah, that's you. Sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Here's how effective the registry is. In Connecticut alone, there's over 840 men that are non-compliant, and women, non-compliant. They don't even know where they are. 840 on that list. And they tell you, if you go to the list, the registry under the state police just shows you that. They're non-compliant. If you had to get one officer to chase everybody down, it's 800 officers. So what's the purpose of this registry? I don't get it. And what the other lady said is yes. And listen, I'm a Christian. I pray. I believe she's right. We shouldn't have taken the Bible out of school. We shouldn't be teaching our children evolution. And we taught them we came from slime pits and we die. You know, we're animals and we go back to being animals. And so they're acting like animals because that's what they're taught. And so we've removed the God consciousness of morality out of our country. And, you know, it's either back to the Bible or back to the jungle. That's all I have to say.
All right. Thank you, Peter. Appreciate it. 860, go ahead. I know you just talked like that. Any final thoughts here? Area code 860, David, I think it is, right?
Oh, did it? Oh, no. I actually, I'm
sorry. I apologize. I got like 50 calls on my own screen here,
totally
loading here, people hanging up. Go ahead.
No, that's great. Well, I jumped in a bit earlier. I guess, you know, first of all, I just want to say thank you for this opportunity to actually have had a chance to speak and raise some of these issues. I think this is an important thing to actually have an open discourse because there's a lot of different perspectives and a lot of valid perspectives and a lot of hurt that's been done. So what I'd say is, you know, please, everyone continue to be critical. You know, don't buy into the hype and look into what is actually the effects of some of these laws and how they actually play out and what their effects are on safety. Because as I tell people who get involved with us at OSJ, in some ways this is the easiest policy area to get involved in because it is so clearly off the track of where it needs to be, and it's so easy to show that. But at the same time, there's so much wrapped up in it, and there's so much hurt that's already happened in this country around these issues that it's very difficult to try to come up with a rational solution. So we need everyone's help to kind of pull together to do that. And that's.
And can you give the listeners your credentials and who you are again, and just real quick, and what you do?
Sure. Yeah. My name is David Walsh. I work with OSJ as their legislative coordinator. I've been working with Connecticut's government for probably about 15 years, and I've worked with nonprofits pretty much my whole life. So I kind of team up with Cindy to work on strategy, communications, things like that.
Okay. Well, thank you. And Cindy, before I get to you, let me give my closing thoughts. The prison industrial complex needs to be shut down. I lived it, I've seen it, and people know that, and a lot of people on this know some of my story. It's a failure, and it's just like the war on drugs. How do you declare war on your own people? It's a failure. The policies are failure. So we have to ask ourselves hard questions. What are the solutions? Are we going to register people and label people and like Suzette said, gun registry? She's against that. We should be against any type of real registry. When you commit a crime and you make a mistake, like she said, you screw up. They screwed up. Okay, everyone screws up in life one way or another, some worse than others. But you have to be accountable for your actions, and we do believe in holding people accountable. When you make a mistake, you will be held accountable. Nobody is denying that. But when you go to court and you're sentenced or whatever it may be, 5 years, 1 year, 10 years, that's it. The judge didn't say a lifetime of punishment, a lifetime of scrutiny, a lifetime of registry. You know, and that's what they're doing. They're labeling these people of certain crimes and throughout the country, and it's destroying their lives because we live in a judgmental society that doesn't know how to forgive. We don't know how to give people a second chance. America is the land of second chances. I mean, we're kind of hypocritical on that a lot of times throughout various subjects or points. And I understand when you talk about a child being molested or a child being raped or a woman being raped. It's an emotional issue. It's powerful, and a lot of people. It takes courage to stand up and address that issue and talk about it. So that's what we're doing. We're trying to talk about these issues and bring them to light, because if we don't talk about them, they'll stay in darkness, and there'll be victims on both sides. And we don't want any more victims in this country. Enough of us been victims, whether it be from the government, from each other, what have you. And we have to stop being victims, and we have to be fighters and stand up for what's right and what's truthful. Cindy, go ahead. Over to you. You have to wrap it up.
Okay, well, I have nothing profound to say other than it's a hard area. I also like having fun because we are beaten down a lot and heartbroken by what we see and what we hear on both sides of the coin. And Joe, whatever you said, I'm in full agreement with. This is not a second chance society. It's a bogus second chance society. And I would just like to encourage Florida and California to try to dig a bit deeper, because I'm sorry if you felt this was too simplistic, but we do tend to overcomplicate things and can't come up with solutions that way. So I hope you will get on our website, onestandardofjustice.org/webinar, and look at Dr. Carl Hansen, look at Marley Liss, and look at Dr. Alyssa Ackerman. And that's all I've got to say. Joe, thank you so much. You can invite me back again, but I'm only going to talk about pollinators gardening.
Okay. Listen, I would like to give you a call. I would like to talk to you. I know I didn't call you before the show. I should have touched base with you. I kind of put you on the spot right away, but I'd like to probably give you a call when you're free. I know you're very busy. Maybe tomorrow touch base with you, just let you know how the show went. But yeah, I'd like to have you back in the future. Maybe next time you try to get this legislation pushed, and maybe I could try to help you. And if I'm elected here in North Carolina, we can tackle this issue together, working across state lines and making it more of a national conversation too, where we can address these. They all need to be addressed. That would be great.
Joe, you invited us back in the fall so we can, because our campaign will be underway.
Great, I will. You got my promise on that, and that would be great to have you back. So thank you so much for coming, and it was a great conversation tonight. Everybody, God bless our republic. Take care. And if you want to listen to the show in the archive, go to blogtalkradio.com/Joseph Gibson. Cindy, I'll email you a link to the show so you can maybe send it out to some friends or maybe use it as an educational tool. But everybody, thank you for listening tonight. We had a full house tonight. So thank you, and God bless. Take care.